Well. What do we have here? A couple of thinkers wanting to find out more about Gannondorf's hidden lore? Yeah, right. It's totally not because you want more Twinrova content. On second thought, maybe it's not such a bad idea looking into little old Ganny's origins. So, in one of my last videos covering evil gemstones, which a link should pop up in the description right about now. But anyway, in this video, I made a fairly strong reference to all those nitty-gritty features of Ganondorf, from his olive green skin, rounded ears, yellow eyes, and of course, the obvious red hair. Now, when recording footage for that video, it really drove home for me the striking resemblance Gannondorf shares with, Twinrova. Yeah, okay, looks like you do get to make a reappearance in this video. Well, damn, that's like the same joke in under a minute. At this rate, I'll be cancelled by June! We are told by Navi, in the English version of Ocarina of Time, that the two halves that combine to create Twinrova, Koume and Kotake, are the surrogate parents of Gannondorf. But there's something very odd about all this, something that doesn't quite make sense for me. The meaning of surrogate literally infers that a person carried and birthed a child on behalf of someone else. Now, the twin witch sisters are both described this way. Both of them. Not one, not the other, both. Which is odd, considering the obvious fact two people can't give birth to the same child at the same time. It just doesn't work that way. What is possible, though, is that two people can raise a child. Phew, that was hard to get across without any misunderstandings or mishaps with words, but here we are. Anyway, where I'm going with this may surprise you, if not shock you, as it was certainly a shock for me. When looking at the Japanese version of Ocarina of Time, I stumbled across something startling. Now this is a major find and revelation for me, and quite possibly for the Zelda community even. You see, the thing is, multiple sources describe Koume and Kotake as the surrogate mother of Gannondorf. And yes, whilst the English version of Ocarina of Time does state this in Navi's written description, when I cross-checked the characters of the Japanese version of Ocarina of Time and compared them to the English version, the Japanese characters representing the word Zelda Oya are used to describe the type of parental relationship Koume and Kotake share in relation to Ganondorf. Now I checked the meaning of Zelda Oya through different web pages, language databases, and yes, even Google Translate, and they all said the same thing. However, it wasn't until I had this confirmed by someone I could find who actually knows Japanese fluently that I felt confidence in what I'm about to say. But regardless, now that I have confirmed Zelda Oya's true meaning, I can safely say that its meaning actually is completely different from surrogate parent, and instead meant to have been translated as foster parent. This completely changes the meaning of the relationship that Koume and Kotake share with Ganondorf, and also makes complete and utter sense, but this causes a snowball of questions to then follow through. Before answering any of that though, I just want to say thank you to Sidier over on Larulian Historian's Discord for confirming the Japanese translation of Zelda Oya for me. You're awesome, man. You deserve every bit of credit for this direct translation. Now, continuing on. Translation errors crop up all the time. It doesn't matter what game franchise it is, and considering the developers are Japanese, anything they write within their own language you would think is a direct reflection of what they intended to say or think when deciding the meaning of any and all lore within the Zelda franchise. The translators are there to do their best to get across what the developers are trying to say, and that often can lead to problems along the way when mistakes are made. Now, the differences in meaning behind the words surrogate and foster is day and night. However, the contextual area in which these two words are used is where the similarities are drawn, and where I believe the error was made. As we've previously established, surrogacy means to carry and give birth to the child on behalf of the parents whom wish to raise the child, whereas foster means to adopt and raise a child not born from your own family. Now, I'm 99.9% sure this was an error on the translator's part in trying to get across what the developers at Nintendo genuinely wanted to say about the Witch Sisters. If Nintendo ever sees this and decides otherwise, I can accept that. However, for now, the evidence is in the fine print, and the fine print in Japanese reads as foster mother. And with that, I'm going to say it's implicitly what Nintendo intended as canon, but was lost in translation. I'd love to hear and see what people think about this either in the comments or in Discord's comments, but regardless, now that we have established the Witch Sisters adopted Gannondorf, not that they had somehow collectively birthed him in some bizarre two-way surrogacy because translation error logic, we have now opened the possibility for explaining now how Twinrova, not the Witch Sisters, is Ganondorf's biological mother. What came first? The cuckoo or the egg? Twinrova or her counterparts, the Witch Sisters? Koume and Kotake only make up half of what actually is the being Twinrova. This coming from both a genetic standpoint as well as from the perspective that they are both the literal and separate halves of Twinrova's mind, body, and spirit. Twinrova herself is a separate being altogether and only comes into existence when the two become one. So, circling back again, what came first? Twinrova or the Witch Sisters? Perhaps Twinrova existed first, then at some stage split herself in half to conserve energy and to increase her lifespan. Or alternatively, Twinrova was a being that was created second when the twin sisters discovered that they could fuse together. To be honest, presently I'm not really sure, so for now, I'll save that question to be answered later on in another video as this one's already fairly long. Now, getting back on topic, what I do want to address here is the genetic similarities that Twinrova and Gannondorf share. As is the case with most life forms, there exist physical traits that are passed down from generation to generation. Now, some of these physical traits can manifest in things like the color of hair, skin, and eyes, as well as the shape of certain body features like the nose and ears. These are some of the physical traits that can be inherited through the generations. In the most general way possible of explaining the process of genetic inheritance, we have what is called alleles. Alleles are basically the gene expression, like say a red hair allele, or a blue skin allele, or the super strength allele. Now, you can have a dominant allele and a recessive allele. This determines which allele has a stronger likelihood of being passed on to the next generation, with the dominant allele being the most likely to pass on. This passing of the genes can vary. However, when humans pass their alleles onto their offspring, the recessive or dominant allele will only be passed on based on what chromosomes the offspring carries and the chromosomes of the parents. I should also mention that there is room for random mutation as well. However, that is less common an occurrence and is not always hereditarily passed on. So, with that basic understanding of how different features are inherited, what kind of features do we see that could imply Gannondorf is the direct offspring of Twinrova? Well, to start with, both Gannondorf and Twinrova share in common a fairly inheritable feature: the shape of their ears. Both character models show clearly that the ears are rounded in shape. Another similarity is one we can discern quite easily but is often glossed over: their eye color. Both share the same bright and powerful yellow eyes, yet another fairly common inheritable physical characteristic. Now, the final physically discernible feature that I want to make a point of is hair color. Gannondorf has red hair, obviously, but red hair is typically a recessive gene. Now, despite Twinrova's gray or white hair, more than likely she had red hair at one point, as everyone is young at some point or another, so once again, I'm going to say that they likely shared that hair color as well. The chances of inheritance between these three features is fairly high, and honestly, it's far too much of a coincidence to really overlook. Also, in another video I'm working on at the same time, Twinrova may have likely founded the entire Gerudo race, which can explain a huge part of why all the Gerudo, including Ganondorf, have the same hair, ears, eyes, and even the same long nose Twinrova has. During the time periods of Ocarina of Time, the entire tribe wasn't just put together by Twinrova, but literally born from her. Only after the countless generations, thousands of years later, from the events of Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess, within Breath of the Wild, well past 10,000 years, do we see different features of other races actually finally expressing themselves within the tribe. Features such as pointed ears over rounded ones, varying eye colors besides yellow, different hair colors even. If this is what Nintendo genuinely intended when they changed the appearances and features of the Gerudo, this is actually super cool, as it shows just how much effort to detail Nintendo goes to make. Now moving on from the more natural physically inheritable traits, let's take a look at the more supernatural. It's entirely possible that Ganondorf was born with large sums of magic energy and abilities he could tap into and use, because his mother, Twinrova, was also incredibly magically gifted and passed on those genetically inherent powers to Ganondorf. You see, at the point Ocarina of Time takes place, Twinrova and Ganondorf's immense powers aside, we do not see many members of the Gerudo tribe displaying any latent magical potential, except for the spirit sage, Nabooru. Perhaps this magical trait of Twinrova's is recessive and only able to be passed on under very specific circumstances. In conjunction to this, another interesting point to make is the similarities of the actual magical abilities Twinrova and Ganondorf use. Both of their magical abilities consist of two things: elemental magic and dark magic. Now, we have all seen consistently that all powers are very specific and defined traits within the Zelda universe. It's no mistake that we can see Ganondorf channeling lightning into either his fists, melee weapons, or into massive balls of lightning. This electrifying force can really be seen when you see his powers reflected back at him. The animations seemingly give off a buzz of electricity pulsing through his entire body. Now, the important details to note is that when he is struck with light arrows, we don't see any kind of electricity flowing through him, thus clearly indicating his powers are more electric in nature. Listening carefully, we even hear an electrifying charge-up sound prior to his projectiles firing. Now, in contrast of Ganondorf's lightning powers, we all know that Twinrova clearly utilizes a complete control over the elements fire and ice, in much the same way Ganondorf has full control over lightning. However, we also know that she had the power to open portals, control minds, and summon beings from other dimensions. Ganondorf can literally do all of this and more. And yes, we can simply attribute his higher levels of magical energy to the Triforce of Power, as that naturally increases the power of anyone holding it, or we could simply attribute it to Ganon's knowledge gained over time. However, in the Zelda universe, it's seemingly apparent, as I said earlier, that characters can only wield certain powers despite a slight difference in expression or power levels, only if they are inherited from someone else. This point is especially prevalent and obvious in Breath of the Wild. Characters such as Daruk and Urbosa come to mind quite strongly. Their respective descendants, Unibo and Riju, show they inherited the ability to wield magic from their parents, and of course the respective abilities their ancestors wielded. Unibo's ability to wield Daruk's protection is fairly obvious. The only reason Riju's power wasn't as noticeable as Urbosa's fury is because she was young and barely trained to wield it. Personally, this is something I'd love to see expanded on in the sequel of Breath of the Wild. Anyway, it's fairly clear that specific abilities boil down to being a trait that is highly specific to a genetic line, or in more familiar terms, a family line. Speaking of which, we have heard the term family line over and over again in countless titles, quite literally specifying powers that are exclusive to certain individuals only. Zelda, literally Zelda. A member of the royal family line is known to carry the might of the goddess Hylia's power within her, as Zelda and Zelda alone shares the blood of the goddess Hylia. This specific statement regarding the blood of the goddess infers that Zelda carries the inherited gene expressions, also known as alleles, passes down in her family to the exclusion of all others, to her and her alone, the powers of her godly ancestor, Hylia. Thus, illustrating in turn, the Zelda franchise is not completely foreign to specific powers or abilities as being inherently hereditary. From this, it's overwhelmingly easy to argue that Ganondorf is no different in his inheritance of his incredibly deep pools of magical energy, but also the inheritance of those specific abilities. Abilities such as control over a specific element, and other abilities described as dark magic such as curses, portals of travel, summoning beings from other worlds. And one final ability not mentioned was the ability to transform. Now, we know in Twilight Princess that the Triforce pieces aid in transformations. However, those powers need to exist within the individual for it to even be used in the first place. So really, I'd say that Ganondorf's transformation power was an inherited derivative of Twinrova's transformation and his father's abilities as well. Twinrova is a being created from a fusion. This can be interpreted as a form of transformation, if you want to really look at it that way. And Ganondorf does transform into a giant pig demon at the end of the game. If I was to look at this one way, I think perhaps due to the wounds sustained in the first fight with Link, Ganondorf's reserve magical power was depleted, meaning he was drawing more energy from the Triforce of Power. If that's true, then his transformation ability is something completely inherent to Ganondorf himself, and not something granted or bestowed from the Triforce of Power alone. Now, that aside, what I really want to address from this is why Ganondorf's powers are greater and also slightly different from Twinrova's. Firstly, remember what I said previously, that alleles are passed on depending on the chromosomes of the child as well as the chromosomes of the parents. Well, that's the thing. We've been trying to talk about the link between Ganondorf and his mother Twinrova, and there is also a possibility it's a random gene mutation, as they can and do happen, but who exactly was the father? Well, we could put that down to him being conceived from the hatred of Demise. However, that can't be the case if he was a literal reincarnation of Demise, and that doesn't really sit well with me as being the reason for Ganondorf's conception alone. Instead, I'd argue that he actually had a very real father, perhaps even as powerful as Twinrova, of whom quite possibly wielded lightning abilities even. So, just who was Ganondorf's father? Who knows? But what we can clearly argue for now is that Ganondorf descended from an extremely magically gifted, or should I say, well-endowed, Twinrova. In another video, I'd like to try and tackle the question of who Ganondorf's father really is. So if that video does happen, a link will be in the top right corner. Sadly though, I'm out of time. What do you all think? Is Twinrova really Ganondorf's biological mother? Did Ganondorf really inherit his powers? Or did Demise simply bestow them on him? Either way, let me know what you all think in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit the like button with a massive thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe for more videos. If you're looking to buy a shirt with our channel's art on it, you can buy them from my Teespring page, links below in the video description. Also, hey, if you want to watch the progress of my videos behind the scenes, give direct feedback as I go along, as well as be in the running for exclusive shirt giveaways, then feel free to join as a member on my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Like damn, that's less than a coffee even. Speaking of coffee, I'm bushed. I'm gonna head out and get working on the next video, thinkers. Catch you all next time, bye bye!